गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा श्रील प्रभुपादा एवं विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिलक्ष्य स्तोत्र सदस्य श्रीमद् स्वयं शेष भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन संस्थापक श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिलक्ष्य स्तोत्र सदस्य श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम पुष्पा श्री लकुर किशोर दास बाबू महाराज की जय। जय ओम पुष्पा सच्चिदानंद श्री भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय। जय ओम पुष्पा वैष्णव साधुओं श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबू महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्टर गुणा श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास अविनाश गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य श्री अवदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कोई श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत दाता शिव साधु गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपिन श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिवर्धन की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण भगवान की जय। श्री मायापुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। गंगा माई की जय। यमुना माई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय। श्री हरनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद भागवतम की जय। इस्कॉन पद्मनाभ गुरुवंद की जय। समावित भक्तिवंद की जय। गौरव प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembly. All glories to the assembly. All glories to the assembly. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudire. नष्टप्रायेषु अपत्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी. Hare Krishna. Welcome you all to this Tuesday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. We are today discussing from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3, Chapter 21, Text 15.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, the text 14 is not been done, Prabhu.
I don't know about it. The thing is, what happened is, Jyotishar Prabhu is admitted in the hospital. So there was some problem in the coordination. So we'll sort it out. If you want me to read just the sloka and translation, I don't mind. But the purport for both are long. But I'll read the sloka for 14, but we'll discuss on 15.
Okay, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
So we'll read first Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 21, Text 14. Ye mayaya te hatamedasastvad पादारविन्दं भव सिन्धुपोथम् उपासते कामलवाय तेषां राशीष कामान् निरेपियेषुः. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Your lotus feet are the true vessel to take one across the ocean of mundane nescience. Only persons deprived of their intelligence by the spell of the deluding energy will worship those feet with a view to attain the trivial and momentary pleasures of the senses, which even persons rotting in hell can attain. However, O my Lord, you are so kind that you bestow mercy even upon them. Now we'll read text 15. I will explain the parts of the 14th chapter, not a problem. Text 15. Tata sachaham parivodu kamaha samanashilam grihamedadhenhum Upeivan moolam ashesha moolham durashaya kama dugangripasya tata shachaham parivodu kamaha samanashilam grihmedadhenum upeivan moolam ashesha moolham durashaya kama dugangripasya tata shachaham parivodu kamaha samanashilam grihmedadhenum upeivan moolam ashesha moolham Durashaya Kama Dugangripasya. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Therefore, desiring to marry a girl of like disposition, who may prove to be a veritable cow of plenty in my married life, to satisfy my lustful desire, I too have sought the shelter of your lotus feet, which are the source of everything, for you are like a desired tree. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. In spite of his condemning persons who approach the Lord for material advantages, Kardam Muni expressed his material inability and desire before the Lord by saying, although I know that nothing material should be asked from you, I nevertheless desire to marry a girl of like disposition. The phrase like disposition is very significant. Formerly, boys and girls of similar dispositions were married. The similar natures of the boy and girl were united in order to make them happy. Not more than 25 years ago, and perhaps it is still current, parents in India used to consult the horoscope of the boy and girl to see whether there would be factual union in their psychological conditions. These considerations are very important. Nowadays, marriage takes place without such consultation, and therefore, soon after the marriage, there is a divorce and separation. Formerly, husband and wife used to live together peacefully throughout their whole lives, but nowadays it is a very difficult task. Kardama Muni wanted to have a wife of like disposition because a wife is necessary to assist in spiritual and material advancement. It is said that a wife yields the fulfillment of all desires in religion, economic development, and sense gratification. If one has a nice wife, he is to be considered a most fortunate man. In astrology, a man is considered fortunate who has great wealth, very good sons, or a very good wife. Of these three, who has a very good wife is considered the most fortunate. Before marrying, one should select a wife of like disposition and not be enamored by the so-called beauty or other attractive features for sense gratification. In the Bhagavatam 12th canto, it is said that in the Kali Yuga, marriage will be based on the consideration of sex life. As soon as there is deficiency in sex life, the question of divorce will arise. Kadam Muni could have asked his benediction from Uma, for it is recommended in the scriptures that if anyone wants a good wife, he should worship Uma. But he preferred to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead because it is recommended in the Bhagavatam that everyone, whether he is full of desires, has no desire, or desires liberation, should worship the Supreme Lord. Of these three classes of men, one tries to be happy by fulfillment of material desires, another wants to be happy by becoming one with the Law Supreme, and another, the perfect man, is a devotee. He does not want anything in return from the personality of Godhead. He only wants to render transcendental loving service. In any case, everyone should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for he will fulfill everyone's desire. The advantage of worshipping the Supreme Person is that even if one has desires for material enjoyment, if he worships Krishna, he will gradually become a pure devotee and have no material hankering. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamahyam Dadati Sva Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Udapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrjatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Savadhutam Parijan Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Saganalta Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Taptagan Chanagaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarupyascha Kripasindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nitya Ananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Karoti Vachalam Bangam Nande Kapata Muhammad Shivaram Dinatarnam Paramadam Shri Chaitanya Mishra. Hare Krishna. So I will discuss a few points from text number 14. Here, your lotus feet, Kardamuni prays to the Lord. Your lotus feet are the true vessel to take one across the ocean of mundane desires. Only persons deprived of their intelligence by the spell of the deluding energy will worship those feet with a view to attain a trivial and momentary pleasures of the senses, which even persons rotting in hell can attain. However, O my Lord, you are so kind that you bestow mercy upon them. So the point in this shloka is that there are two classes of devotees. One who desires some material pleasure and one who desires nothing else but loving transcendental service to the Lord. So those who ask for some benediction from the Lord, that is one class who wants to satisfy their senses. And in this verse, Kardamuni is actually condemning such type of personalities he says only those who are deprived of intelligence by the deluding energy of Maya will worship, take shelter of a lotus feet to attain some trivial and momentary pleasures of the senses. That means if somebody has got a desire and worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead to fulfill that desire, it is said such a person is less intelligent. But then it is concluded, Srila Prabhupada concludes that even such a person, the Lord is so merciful to him that the Lord bestows his mercy upon that person. So, like I mentioned, there are two classes of devotees. One is who has material desires and one who has got a desire to serve the Lord. Both the desires the Lord fulfills. But in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that there are many yogis who try to propagate saying that one should try to satisfy their senses by practicing yoga. But that is not the truth. The truth is that one should be in a stage where they should be aspiring only to render service to the Lord. Now what we'll do is, it's also mentioned that the Lord is so kind that even those who are having such desire to enjoy senses like cats and dogs, still the Lord awards them material happiness. But in the following verse, we will discuss further on the subject. Here it is said, therefore desiring to marry a girl of like disposition, who may prove to be a veritable cow of plenty in my married life, to satisfy my lustful desire, I too have sought the shelter of their lotus feet, which are the source of everything for your like a desire tree. Now here we see that the previous verse, Kardamuni actually condemns those who aspire something for the Lord, material. Now here in this verse, he says that he would like to have a girl, marry a girl of like disposition, for which he is seeking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Now it might look a bit contradictory that in the previous verse he is condemning those who are aspiring for some material happiness. And in this verse, we see that he is asking the Lord, he is taking shelter of the Lord for a girl, to seek a girl so that he can marry. And the Lord is the shelter of everything because the Lord is like a desert tree. So here we must understand why is it so. Actually, Lord Brahma tells Kardamuni to go for progeny. And based on the instructions given by Lord Brahma to Kardamuni, he wants to go for progeny. And that is the reason he is asking the Supreme Lord for a girl for marriage. So actually, it is said that Kardamuni is humbling himself by putting this petition that he is seeking a girl for marriage. But actually, it is based on the instructions of Lord Brahma. So he is trying to put himself in a situation like any other materialist just to show his humility. So now what we will do is we'll understand some of the vital aspects of why he is asking a girl, suitable girl for marriage. Now in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions, in fact Srila Prabhupada actually starts by mentioning that in the previous verse how he is condemning. Nevertheless, he would like to have a girl of a light disposition. What is this light disposition? We'll try to understand from a little bit about that. Earlier, it is said that the boys were and the girls were married. Actually, in the Vedic system of marriage, the horoscopes were taken into consideration to see whether the horoscopes are matching. So there is a mention here that when the horoscopes are matched, of course, even it might be becoming less, the practice might be becoming less these days, but earlier this was the practice. By matching the horoscopes, it is said that there is a matching of their psychological conditions, which is very, very important for a marriage to be successful. And if that is not done, then there is a divorce and separation. And Srila Prabhupada also mentions how earlier husband and wife used to live together peacefully throughout their whole lives. But actually nowadays it is very, very difficult. Now the reason is that Nowadays, the marriage is based on more on physical beauty and satisfaction of the senses rather than the real true aspects of a marriage. Earlier, this, in fact, I still know that there were some articles about how a boy and a girl would be married during their early years of their life itself, even before they attain 13 or 14, the boy and girl used to be married. But after that, they used to be go back to their respective homes. This is also mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam also. And then when the boy starts earning a living, then the girl would join him. Until then, they would be separated. This was a practice prevalent quite some time back. But even forget about that. Here, Srila Prabhupada mentions how about 20 or 30 years before, this was the vital aspect of marriage, matching the horoscope. Now, horoscope is astrology is a true science. There is no doubt about it. One should try to reach out to a good astrologer and then get these aspects and who can actually go through the horoscope in detail. And then he says the horoscope is matched or the horoscope is matched this much percentage, or I'm not into astrology. And some might say that this is not matching. This was the basis of marriage. And Kardamuni is insisting on that for to the putting his petition to the Supreme Lord for a wife to be like that. Now, marriage has to be successful. Now, why marriage has to be successful? What are the basic understanding of marriage? It is said that a good wife yields the fulfillment of all the desires that a husband may have in terms of religion, economic development, and sense gratification. If one has got a nice wife, he is considered to be the most fortunate man. Now, Srila Prabhupada also mentions that in astrology, as per astrology, a man is considered fortunate who has got great wealth, very good sons, or a very good wife. And of these three, one who has a very good wife is considered to be the most fortunate. Now, we will come to this aspect. Why? Because when one has a good wife, the husband is also well placed, both materially as well as spiritually. Wife is also of a similar psychological character. Then what happens is that one automatically gets good son. And then the wealth also comes in, which we will read later as to how. So a true good husband and wife, if they are living properly to leading to a successful married life, they will have a good progeny as well as good wealth. Good, when I say good wealth, may not be very opulent, but for them to sustain. And that is what is success in marriage. So that is why it is very necessary that one selects a wife of proper disposition. That is why Kardamuni mentions about the veritable cow, because cow can fulfill the desires of a living entity, or a cow is considered very holy also. Similarly, the wife of the position of a wife and husband are very important in a married life. But in the 12th canto, there is a mention that as to how Kali Yuga people will get married purely on the consideration of sex life. Now, what happens is that people look at external beauty and other external aspects of the opposite sex. They get married, and then at some point of time, that desire is not being fulfilled anymore. Finally, the marriage there is a divorce, and then there is separation. So this is what is happening in Kali Yuga, which is already mentioned in the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And we see that signs are already there these days of marriages being not very successful, even in India. Nowadays, we have a tendency to follow the Western culture. So without marriage, the current tendency is to have a live-in situation where a boy and girl lives together for some time. And then they feel that they cannot live for a very long time, and then they separate. So even the marriage as a samskara, marriage is a samskara which is recommended in the Shastras. There are many samskaras, of which marriage is one. These are all purificative processes through which one has to go through to lead a successful life in the human form of life. Otherwise, it's like a life of cats and dogs, because cats don't have horoscope. They don't have a matching of their psychological behavior. So one who does not go through the samskaras lives a life of cats and dogs. So now, why wife is necessary? A wife can assist a husband to progress both in terms of spiritual and material. Now, if one has a nice wife, it is considered that now there are three classes of men. Srila Prabhupada mentions. Once again. In the sixth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a mention of how a woman can help her husband in fulfilling his desires. Now, the example is given that the natural instinct of a woman is to enjoy the material world. It's a natural instinct. Of course, it is there with both man and woman. But what happens, how she can assist in spiritually, that is what is mentioned here. A wife induces her husband to enjoy this world by actually cooking some nice palatable dishes, so that by which a husband is satisfied in eating. And when one eats nicely, his belly is also satisfied. Now, here in this aspect, there is a mention, the most important thing is having prasada, which I will come to a little later. When a man is, this is particularly meant for those who are materialistic and who are eating meat and drinking wine. When a man is accustomed to eating meat and drinking wine, and when she has cooked some nice palatable these things, what happens is his senses are agitated, and his senses are agitated, and he wants to have nothing but physical union out of the beauty of a woman. In other words, in such a place, the marriage is in a risk. But in other words, it is said that a husband should be trained at the very beginning of his life. So when a husband during his student life, he is being trained to be a proper brahmacharya. He is taught Bhagavata Dharma or devotional service. And then what happens is that when he marries, he abstains from all these unwanted habits. And when he gets a good wife or of a like disposition, and if the wife is faithful to her husband, then such a relationship of husband and wife is very desirable, and is also not only desirable but is also successful. But yeah, relationship between husband and wife without spiritual consciousness is purely for sense gratification, which is not at all good. So that is why the stress has always been given in terms of training a husband in brahmacharya. That is, he should be completely engaged not only in celibacy but also in the service of the Lord. And under no circumstances he should associate with any woman during this time. When the boy becomes a young man, then he marries between the ages of 20 and 25. This was the ideal time that was earlier recommended for marriage. Then when he is married at the right age, it is said that he can immediately beget strong and healthy sons. Of course, nowadays it is said that men are becoming weak sexually and women are becoming stronger. But in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that a male child will be born if the husband is sexually stronger than the wife. But if the female is stronger, a female child will be born. Thus, therefore, with this into consideration, actually, as per the Shastras, it is said that a son is required, which also we'll see discuss it, subject to availability of time. So therefore, it is said that if a husband practices the celibacy, he becomes a brahmacharya, successful brahmacharya, and he can beget a male child, which is required in one's married life, because one has to offer oblations to his forefathers by which they can be delivered. This need not be applicable for the devotees, but generally this was the purpose for which marriage was done. And then what used to happen was, even in such a successful marriage, it is not that the husband lives at home throughout his life. The practice was at the age of 50, he should give up the family life. And because at that time the children would have grown up and they can take care of the mother, the husband and wife may go out to live a retired life as a vanaprastha and travel to different places of pilgrimage. That was the purpose. Why? Because that is also a process of purification. And when both husband and wife travel on a pilgrimage, what happens is that they don't have attachment to their homes or children and so forth. The wife used to return back home to be taken care under the care of her children. The reason is that women have to be protected. The Vedic system of uh, um, protection was a woman has to be protected by her father during her pre-marriage days. Then she is protected by the husband post-marriage, and thereafter she has to be protected by her sons. This is how a woman is always protected. That's why woman is called the weaker sex, because they need protection. The husband thereafter, he takes sannyasa to render some service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this way, the husband always is engaged throughout his life in devotional service, and the wife is thereafter taken care of by the children, both materially as well as spiritually. Now, in the sixth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is also a mention how before union between a man and a woman, a wife should serve prasadam to her husband. So it is not only that they are married based on psychological circumstances by matching the horoscope, but thereafter, the way they live between the husband and wife should be proper. So when a husband is spiritually situated, a wife also inspires the husband to be engaged all the time spiritually. And from her part, she serves the husband nice prasadam that is offered to the Lord, Supreme Lord. So earlier we discussed about how a person who is eating meat, his wife satisfies such a husband also, which results in the senses being agitated. But a true wife is one who actually serves her husband prasadam that is offered to the Supreme Lord, which is a source of purification for everyone. In this case, I just remembered one instance which was narrated to me by yesterday by a friend of mine. He said in Kasargod, I think it is in Kerala, there is an Ananta Padmanabha Swami temple where a crocodile left its body yesterday or day first, 2 days before. Now that crocodile, it is said, was living, sustaining by taking prasadam. The priest used to offer prasadam offered to the Lord at least twice a day. That was the way the crocodile lived. And after 75 years, I believe the crocodile left its body some 1 or 2 days back. This is the potency of prasadam. If a crocodile can have purification and leave its body by sustaining on prasadam, why not a man? So this is just a not off track, but then an example that came to my mind. Now, another point that is mentioned is that accepting her husband as a representative of the Supreme Person, a wife should worship him with unalloyed devotion by offering him prasada. The husband, being very pleased with his wife, should engage himself in the affairs of his family. So, important point is that a wife should worship the husband by offering him nice prasada. Instead of offering nice, delicious eatables, one should offer the husband nice prasada. And when the husband is being pleased with his wife, he should also engage in the affairs of the family. It is not that he ignores the family. He should also be engaged in the affairs of the family so that everyone progresses spiritually. There is also another quote which mentions that a person should worship her husband as a husband or a demigod. Now, a husband is a supreme demigod for a woman. This is also mentioned in the sixth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The supreme personality of Lord Vasudeva, the husband of the goddess of fortune, is situated in everyone's heart. That means the Lord is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. And the Lord is worshipped through various names and forms of the demigods by fruity workers. But of course, it is applicable to the devotees also. It says that a husband represents the Lord as an object of worship for a woman. That means a husband should be looked at as an object of worship, not as an object of sense gratification. This is how a woman should be looking at her husband. So, if we see Karda Muni is asking for this benediction for a good wife who can be compatible by nature and then help him progress spiritually, and we'll see in the subsequent verses how they got a son as the Supreme Lord himself, who came as Kapila Deva. We will not go into that detail. On the other hand, we will discuss some uh, uh, thoughts on the marriage that generally takes place these days. It is said that a husband and wife, a man and wife, they generally plan to attain some happiness after marriage. This is not actually a Vedic marriage, but a situation in marriage which we are looking at today, which is happening. They generally plan to live jointly together and to attain some happiness. But then the desires are something that can never be fulfilled. So when we have the desires which are flowing constantly, in that case, particularly material desires, they can never be a source of happiness. On the other hand, it brings a lot of distress. So this is one reason for marriage not being successful. In the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a mention as to how Prithu Maharaj, who is an empowered incarnation of the Supreme Lord himself, he is giving a purpose of a marriage. He says the purpose of marriage is to have a putra or a son who is able to deliver his father. Now, in a materialistic family, there is always desires. That is why in the previous sloka, there is a mention of two classes of devotees. One who has got some material desires and one who has got a desire to render transcendental loving service to the Lord. Now, one who has a desire to render service to the Lord fulfills that desire also. And one who has got a desire for some material desire, the Lord fulfills that also. And one might not perfect his life in devotion service in one life. So such persons, they go to heavenly planets if they do some little bit of devotion service and have some material desire also. Lord always gives an opportunity, which we'll discuss as a concluding point, for one to be purified of all these desires when one is fixed in the devotion service. Now, generally those who go to heavenly planets, they need to be delivered. For that, a son is required, for which a husband has to be very strong, which I mentioned earlier. If he is strong, then he can have a son who can deliver his father by offering oblations, which we call Shraddha ceremony. And we offer the son is trained to become, to offer these oblations by which forefathers are delivered from their hellish planets or heavenly planets, wherever they are situated. So this was the purpose of marriage from the Vedic, from the materialistic point of view. But in the Vedic system, it is said in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam itself, an ideal husband and wife are generally called Lakshmi Narayana. That means if the wife worships the husband as a representative of God, and the husband respects her as Lakshmi Devi, they are compared to the Lord and the goddess of fortune. And such couple, they live a very, very happy and prosperous, successful married life. Not only that, there are some points which I mentioned, the purport. A wife should always remain satisfied with her husband, and a husband should always remain satisfied with his wife. So both should be satisfied with each other. In fact, Prabhupada gives a reference from Chanakya Pandita. He says that if a husband and wife are always satisfied with one another, then the goddess of fortune automatically comes. In other words, where there is no disagreement between husband and wife, all the material opulence is present and good children are born. This I mentioned in the beginning of the class, that if one lives a good life as Lakshmi Devi and goddess and Lord Narayana, then automatically they not only get good children, but also wealth also, because Lakshmi Devi is also there. So according to Vedic civilization, the wife is trained to be satisfied in all conditions. So this is a very important point. This was the Vedic culture. A wife is also trained to such a way to please the husband with sufficient, and the husband also pleases his wife with sufficient ornaments, clothing, etc. And then if they are satisfied, both of them, with their mutual dealings, good children are born. So this is a reference from the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So from this we see how important that both husband and wife play in a married life. In the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a mention as to how a girl is married. A selection of a good husband, the selection of a good husband for a girl is the responsibility of the parents. Now, Manu and his wife were actually coming to see Kardamuni to offer their daughter because the daughter was well qualified. Now, Kardamuni's devotee was the daughter of Manu, and they, both Manu and his wife, were coming to see Kardamuni and offer their daughter for marriage because they felt that he was the right person, and the daughter also was well qualified and trained. So this is how it is mentioned that girls are never thrown into the what do you call area where they are in a position. They are never thrown into the public street. This is the literal word that Srila Prabhupada mentioned in the purport. Girls are never thrown into the public street to search out for their husband, because when they are grown up, it is the duty of a father to get her married to a suitable husband. And this is a perfect example of how Kardamuni and his Manu came along with his wife to see offer his daughter to Kardamuni. It is said that out of urge for a sense gratification, a girl might accept anybody. But if the husband is chosen by the parents, then they can consider who can be selected and who is not. Therefore, according to the basic system, the girl is given to a suitable boy by the parents. She is never allowed to select her own husband independently. So if we see today, a girl selects her own boy for marriage, and a boy also selects his own selects a girl based on his own material desires, which is normally based on external beauty than psychological behavior. Then, post marriage, it is said that a wife should never leave her husband. This is mentioned in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. According to Vedic conception of family life, the husband gives half his body to his wife, and the wife gives half her body to her husband. In other words, a husband without a wife or a wife without a husband is incomplete. So it is said that both are half and they combine to make one. So that means a husband cannot live without his wife, and a wife cannot live without a husband. So therefore, Vedic marital relationship existed. Examples are given by Shiva and Sati. But sometimes a woman, sorry. So a good husband and wife examples are given many in Srimad Bhagavatam. And generally, separation between husband and wife is due to womanly behavior. Sometimes divorce takes place due to womanly weaknesses. Therefore, the best course for a woman is to abide by the orders of her husband. Now, here we see why a woman is supposed to abide by the orders of a husband, because a husband is spiritually strong, materially strong. That is why he is also intelligent, both spiritually as well as materially. That is why it is said that a woman should abide by the orders of her husband. And that makes a family life very, very peaceful. And sometimes it's also said that there can be misunderstandings between a husband and wife, which is very common. But still, it is said that a woman should never leave her husband, because she has to be protected by her husband only. And if she leaves, what happens is that she looks for other avenues for sense gratification. So that is why it is said that a successful husband and wife is required. Why? Because when a wife serves her husband, she prevents her husband from looking outside for sense gratification. And similarly, when a husband satisfies a wife, he sees to it and he is protecting his wife properly. She is also under the care of her husband and she does not look for sense gratification out of her marriage. And then when both are spiritually well placed, then they understand the purpose of life and they live a successful life. And then thereafter, they have a good children who can continue the progeny and they offer oblations also. In the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is also a mention as to how a husband is actually a spiritual master. Now, Kardamuni was Devahuti's husband, but he instructed her on how to achieve spiritual perfection, which we will be discussing in the subsequent verses. So naturally, he was a perfect example of being a spiritual master also. The examples given as to how Lord Shiva was a spiritual master of his consort Parvati Devi. The husband should be spiritually enlightened, by which he becomes automatically the spiritual master of his wife. So if a husband is not situated spiritually, then it becomes a marriage for sense gratification. Therefore, it is said that the husband should be spiritually enlightened, by which he becomes the spiritual master of his wife in order to enlighten her spiritually. So this is how both are then spiritually placed. Sri Prabhupada also mentioned that generally stree or a woman is less intelligent than man. Therefore, if the husband is intelligent enough, the woman gets a great opportunity for spiritual enlightenment. See how Sri Prabhupada very nicely explained that women are less intelligent spiritually also. But if she has got a husband who is spiritually well placed, she gets an opportunity for spiritual enlightenment, which ultimately results into her protection. Now, there are some points which I might skip for want of time. In the last paragraph, there is a mention of how Kardamuni asked for this benediction from the Supreme Lord himself. Now, he could have asked Goddess Uma for this benediction, because it is said that those who want a good husband, they worship Uma. But he preferred to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he knew what is the real truth. And the Lord, there is a quote in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which mentions Akamo Sarva Kamovat Moksha Kama. Once again. Yeah, whether one, yeah. Akamo Sarva Kamava Moksha Kama Utaridi Tibrena Bhakti Yogana Yajeta Purusham Param. A person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. So the point is that the advantage of worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead is that even if one has material desires, but he worships Krishna, if he will gradually become a pure devotee and will have no more material hankering. That means if one worships Lord Krishna, even if he has got desires and he performs devotional service, the Lord arranges for such a person so that his material desires are fulfilled. But at some point of time, he feels that, no, I should not have asked for these material benedictions. Example is given in Srimad Bhagavatam itself. Dhruva Maharaj, he was asked by his stepmother. Dhruva Maharaj wanted to sit in his father's lap. And when he sat, his stepmother said, no, you don't have a right. And when Dhruva Maharaj got upset, he went to his mother and he said, he was lamenting. And his mother said that you go and worship the personality of Godhead. Dhruva Maharaj left his home, went to the forest. What happened was, he got a spiritual master in the form of Narad Muni. Narad Muni gave him instructions. He followed the instructions and he performed tapasya. And in the process, he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. We discussed on the austerities that Dhruva Maharaj performed. But when he saw the Supreme Lord face to face, he thought that he was asking for a broken piece of glass, whereas he got an actual gem. So this is what happens. When the Lord fulfills the desire, a devotee actually starts repenting. Why did I ask for this desire? So this is how the Lord actually purifies a desire of a devotee also. Even if someone worships him for material desire, the Lord puts him into a situation where he feels, oh, I should not have asked for this. I should have asked rather for engagement in loving service to the Lord, which is what is there in the previous look also. There are two classes of devotees. One is a materialistic person and one who aspires nothing but transcendental loving service to the Lord. So this is what, but Karta Muni set an example that even though he was asking, he was condemning such person, he was asking for a material benediction, trying to humble himself. So we should not look at Karta Muni as a materialistic person. He was an exalted devotee, because of which Swayambhuva Manu wanted to give his daughter. And as we will see how they lived a very successful life in their marriage, and because both were spiritually well placed, and at some point of time Kardamuni wanted to leave home, and then of course we'll not go into the detail. Kardamuni, they got daughters, and then thereafter wife Devavati said that how can you leave me and go when there is nobody to protect me. Then thereafter they had again, Devahuti gave birth to a son who was none other than Lord Kapil Dev himself, who was an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Lord uh, fulfills the desire of his devotees also. The Lord fulfills the desire of the materialistic person also. There are a lot of discussions on this subject in the third canto, fourth canto, fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, on successful marriage between a husband and wife, and also failures in marriages as to why it happens, marriage fails, and why it is. There's also a mention as to how husband and wife become enemies, and the reason is that, basic reason is that sense gratification. The husband becomes an enemy to his wife and wife becomes an enemy to her husband. And when this happens, the children also become enemies to their parents. These all are based on sense gratification, attainment of sense gratification. And but if one is spiritually placed, then this does not happen. There is also an example given in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, how in spite of Kashyapa Muni being a great devotee of the Lord, his wife Diti wanted to have union with him, but the time was inauspicious, inappropriate. And when she was insisting for Kashyapa Muni to have union, the outcome was that demons were born. We'll not go into this because we already discussed this. So the point is that for a marriage to be successful, one has to be psychologically compatible with each other, and even after marriage, they have to be both living properly in the spiritual aspects, like husbands taking care of his wife, and wife taking care of her husband. And in this way, when they live, they will have good children. Not only good children, the opulence will also follow. So this way, the marriage will be successful. So this is all I had in today's class. Because there are a lot of other points, there may not be time to discuss. So for the next 5 minutes, I can take some questions, some comments on the subject.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Very nice class, Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Anybody else has got any questions, comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam Prabhu.
Today we were talking about wife being like should look after the husband or something like that, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but that doesn't happen in all the families, right? So, what is the solution for that?
One is possibly the initial exercise of Vedic astrology might not have happened, but still, if they get married, the husband can enlighten his wife spiritually. That is the only solution. There is no other solution, because if a wife is truthful to her husband, then husband also takes care of her protection. Now, protection does not mean only physical protection. It also mentions it's spiritual protection also. It's only by understanding the spiritual aspect of life in marriage that a wife will feel secure. Of course, materially also a husband will be protecting her, but the basic reason for a wife not following is because she has got some desires which might not be uh, compatible with progress in the spiritual life of both a husband and wife. So if a husband is spiritually enlightened, he can enlighten his wife. But if a husband is not spiritually enlightened, he may not be able to enlighten her on the purpose of life. Therefore, right from the beginning, a husband should also be trained for brahmacharya. And of course, I didn't mention one point. A wife also should be trained in chastity. Chastity does not mean just external duty to her husband. Internally also, a woman never was exposed to the society. Now, if a woman is exposed to the society, then if the husband is not able to give her the protection or the emotional or spiritual support that she requires, then what happens? She looks for sense gratification outside of marriage, which is a big disaster, which is one of the reasons why the society's marriage is not very successful today. That is why it is always necessary that husband should be very spiritually enlightened, and he should engage her spiritually so that she also serves her husband by serving him nice prasadam, and then both husband and wife can live as Lakshmi and Narayana, and that such a marriage becomes successful. Otherwise, what happens is there is always a discord within the marriage. The children need not be spiritually enlightened if both of them are not well placed spiritually, and children may become averse to spiritual life. So it's the duty of a husband. That is why it is said one should never become a husband, one should never become a father, or one should never become a leader if he cannot deliver his dependent from the cycle of birth and death. I mean, this is a sloka which Srila Prabhupada always quotes. You must keep this in the back of mind. But if the husband succumbs to the desire of fulfilling his wife's desire, like I mentioned between Kashyapa Muni and Diti, then what happens is that demoniac children can be born. The example was given of Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. And why this example is because, which we see in the today in the society, children are born who don't want to take up spiritual life, and that is the reason. Sense gratification at any cost leads to distress at a later stage. That is why it is always important that one, before begetting a son, enlightens his wife spiritually so that they live properly. When I say spiritually well placed, and when the wife cooks prasadam and offers to the Lord, it has got a big effect, very big effect, which we may not be able to believe or imagine, but it is true. And one of the reasons that I cited the example of crocodile was that if an animal like a crocodile who lives in water and only subsists on eating fish or such entities can be purified, why not we human beings? Prasadam has got a big potency, and when we cook for the Lord, for the satisfaction of the Lord, and offer it to the Lord, and the family honors that prasadam, it purifies everyone. This is one of the most vital aspects. And Srila Prabhupada has given a very simple formula: just chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and eat prasadam, associate with devotees, and hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. There cannot be a better solution than this, than what Srila Prabhupada has given.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for
Thank you.
explaining elaborately. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? Thank you all very much. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada. Jai.
Prabhuji, you are the host now. There
Yes.
is a red button there, and for all. Please
Yeah,
click
I'll
on
do
that.
that.